going to throw. On one, Davis has it. Touchdown! Carolina wins! Carolina is the Coastal Division champion! Javonte Williams to the left of Howell. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howell looking, standing tall, lets it go, man there! Touchdown! Touchdown, Carolina! The pistol, Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson, he tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted! Surratt interception! Holy cow, Carolina's gonna win! And off to Javonte Williams again, pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back, pressure coming, Aguilar floats it up, incomplete! No flags! Head on back up the mountain! Carolina wins it in double overtime!
Loftus out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone, incomplete! Incomplete!
The bell belongs to us!
Carolina wins it 47-45 in double overtime! Bernard fields it at the 26, heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is gonna take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah, guys. A new year means a new intro. And we hope you guys enjoyed that. Welcome into the Heel Tough Blog Podcast here as we get you prepared for the Tar Heels game on Thursday night in Minneapolis against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Anthony Pagnotta here with you guys as always. Josh Marlowe alongside of me. And we got the new intro. We couldn't not put Gio at the end. Tons of excitement to start this season. And I think, that's the thing is it really symbolizes what this year is going to be because this is a new start. It's a new era. You've got questions about who the quarterback is going to be. We're going to discuss that, of course, tonight when we get into the Tar Heels storylines. We have to break down Minnesota for you, what the Golden Gophers are going to be heading into this season, what to expect in this game on Thursday night. And then we're going to have the keys to the game, and we will pick the game at the end as we always do. But I think one of the first things that I want to do here is just, where is the excitement level at? Because I think coming into this offseason, I think a lot of us were probably feeling a little bit down in terms of our excitement. Earlier in the summer, it just didn't feel the same as it's felt in the last few years. And I think that was something that took a little bit of time getting used to, was that you didn't have somebody like Sam Howell. You didn't have somebody like Drake May, where you knew those guys were going to be the starters. Even when they were battling for the job, there was a lot of excitement about those guys. It's not that there isn't excitement for a guy like Connor Harrell, maybe for some with Max Johnson. It's not like Omarion Hampton isn't an exciting player. But I think a lot of us, we talked about it last night. The record predictions were 7 wins, 6 wins. At the max, maybe people were getting to 8. But now as we get here to the start of the season, where is your excitement level for Thursday night in Minneapolis against Minnesota?
Yeah, look, it's definitely different than what it was last year when you start the season preseason ranked. You're playing in Charlotte against a power conference opponent from the SEC. So it's not there. It's kind of more like to where it was when we were ranked to start the year and you went to Virginia Tech. Mainly because I think there was some unknown about that group because you had to, you were replacing a lot of production, although you had a great quarterback in Sam Howell.
Mm-hmm.
This year you're not starting ranked. You're losing a lot of production in the form of Drake May, but you've got a great player in Omarion Hampton that could put together the best running back season we've ever seen by a Tar Heel. So, I think The anticipation has grown, the excitement has grown, and I'm as guilty as any member of the fan base. And it's why, as much as I loathe about Mack Brown, when I listen to him talk, I believe. And I've listened to every press conference since training camp, and I listened to his radio show that he had on Monday night at Top of the Hill. The guy knows how to sell. And so I've showed up once again, even after many declarations saying I was done believing. I show up believing that Carolina is going to have a good season, and I think it starts on Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, and yeah, part of it is Mack Brown, but to a certain extent, I think it's just natural when you're somebody that follows this team. When you start to think about the fact that you've got a defensive coordinator that has had a track record of success, that hasn't been out of the sport for however many years. That was one of the biggest issues I think we kind of overlooked with Gene Chizik, and we said, oh, well, the first time he was here, he had success. But yeah, then he takes another extended period of time off from the game. And I really do think that was an issue. Where Jeff Collins, he took off a year, but at the same time, he was following the game. He was studying this team as one that, when he started to realize that he could get the job, he wanted to be prepared for it. He wanted to know that this was a group that he would be able to coach up. And so when you see things like that, that's where the excitement really starts to set in, is that there's certain areas. I will say, Mack Brown, he sold me on the offensive line possibly being better. Now you could say, well, how in the world could they be much worse than they were down the stretch of last season? And you would have a hell of a point. But I think that's the thing, is that it always really happens. But I think with this team, you see certain elements, like if they lean on Amari and Hampton, yeah, it's hard not to believe that this team can be really good. If this defensive backfield with all the depth that they have, if it's there for the entire season, yeah, how could this defense not take a little bit of a step forward when it comes to defending against the pass, which is something that they've really struggled with at times the last few years. So I think that's the reason why you get excited. It all starts in a game that you have said really makes or breaks their season in your mind. And you're not the only one. There's a lot of people that believe that, as Carolina travels on the road to take on the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Two teams met last year. That was the first time that the two sides have ever met. Carolina won 31-13 in Chapel Hill. This, of course, is the return match of a home and home. Carolina, believe it or not, they are seeking their first true road win in an opener since 1993, when they had a 31-9 win over USC. Now, the thing is that on the surface, that stat's incredibly concerning. But when you look at it, they have not played a ton of true road openers. And when they have, I'm not going to lie to you, the results have not really been that great. The good news is the last time that they played a road opener was against Virginia Tech. You mentioned some of the similarities. I will caution you to remember that team was ranked top 10 in the preseason. So things are certainly a little bit different for this group, who will come in unranked. For the longest time, they were underdogs in this game. That line is now shifted because of some injury issues that Minnesota may be dealing with, which I'll tell you about here in a second. But I think that in that respect, it is a little bit different, where Carolina, they're not going to come in with the expectations. And hopefully, we've seen it before with Mack Brown teams. Those have been when they've succeeded the most, especially in his second tenure. Since Mack Brown has returned, speaking of that second tenure, Carolina 4-1 in season openers. They are 12-3 overall under Mack Brown in his time at North Carolina, first stint and second stint combined. So typically Mack Brown has his guys ready to play out of the gate. Now, let's talk about Minnesota a little bit. Last year, 3-7, 3-6 in the conference. Certainly not the year that they were hoping for. One of the worst years under PJ Fleck. But hey, when you're Minnesota, the fact that you made a bowl game in one of your worst years under your head coach, it shows you that this is a team that is certainly expecting a lot more this year, and this program is growing. Offensively, that was really their biggest issue a year ago. They couldn't score, just 20.9 points per game, rather. Just 300.9 yards of total offense. Biggest issue was their passing game, 143.4 passing yards per game. Ran the ball pretty well at 157.5, but still, that's an area that they want to be even better in this year. The biggest thing that they had to correct, as I mentioned, was that passing game. They went out and got their quarterback. Max Brosmer comes up from New Hampshire. And look, this is a guy that, yes, he comes from the FCS ranks, but he was a second-team All-American at the FCS level and was extremely, extremely efficient the last 2 years at New Hampshire. Threw for 6,613 yards and had a 56-14 touchdown to interception ratio. So he's a guy that threw it a lot, completed a lot of touchdowns, and didn't turn it over nearly at all for a guy. I mean, last year, 29-6 touchdown to interception ratio. That is really, really good for a guy that's throwing the ball at the volume that he was. Darius Taylor is their leading running back in the backfield after a tremendous freshman season, but possible injury with him that's worth monitoring. They do have two running backs that they brought in out of the transfer portal that they really like. Marcus Major out of Oklahoma is the guy that's been raved about the most. And then Saya Bangura out of Ohio is another guy that they are really high on and they think can contribute for them this season. I don't know if they feel like he will be able to contribute right out of the gate, but he may not have a choice. Daniel Jackson at wide receiver, he was the standout. Really, Carolina did a good job of shutting him down last year, but outside of that, he had a tremendous junior season where he was a second-team All-Big Ten receiver, had 59 catches for 831 yards and 8 touchdowns. The pass-catching group outside of him, though, they're looking for other guys to emerge. The guy that they're really hoping steps up is Elijah Spencer, which is a name that some Tar Heel fans, especially if you live in the Charlotte area, might be familiar with because he played for the Charlotte 49ers the first 2 years of his career. He then transferred last year, didn't have a big effect, just 9 catches, 65 yards. But they need him to step up. They need someone to emerge in the slot. And they also have to find a replacement for Brevin Spann-Ford at the tight end position. So a lot of things have to be replaced in that passing game, even with them bringing in a new quarterback that has a pretty decent track record. Meanwhile, their offensive line, pretty veteran group, decent amount of talent there as well. Second team All-Big Ten left tackle Ariante Irsay. He's the guy that's going to anchor the group. And then you've got a guy at guard. Looks like he's probably going to play right guard. Notre Dame transfer Quinn Carroll, who I think is going to have a chance to succeed here after not getting to play a lot at Notre Dame. So when you look at everything that they've got offensively, what type of challenge do you think they will be able to pose for this Tar Heel defense?
I mean, I think it really comes down to the physicality that you'll see from an offensive line group that will look to impose their will on Carolina's defensive front. Look, they're breaking in a new quarterback like Carolina is. I know there was production at the FCS level. This is a step up. I don't think they want him to be out there week one winning the game for him. I think, if Taylor's able to go, they're going to kind of do what we want to do, lean on their running back, try to just manage the game. And so I think for Carolina, looking at this game from a defensive standpoint, this is where limiting big plays, I think, could really come in Carolina's favor. Because I don't know if Minnesota can drive the ball up and down the field consistently enough to score on you. They couldn't do it last year. But if Carolina has some communication issues, they miss tackles in the open space, they've got guys that can kill you. So I think it's a really good litmus test for what this Carolina defense needs to improve upon in week one. This isn't the most explosive offense they'll see all season long, but it's an offense that's going to look to capitalize on the things that have plagued you since Mack Brown came back defensively if Carolina shores those areas up, I think it really gives them a better chance to win the game, because I don't know if Minnesota can drive the football up and down the field over 4 quarters.
Well, and you mentioned Darius Taylor, one of those guys that's questionable, suffered a hamstring injury back on August 13th. There's only been one press conference since where PJ Fleck spoke about he was asked about the injury. As you would imagine, PJ Fleck, a guy that is not releasing a depth chart and is a modern head coach in college football, he basically chose not to answer. He said he's doing good. That could mean anything. That could mean he's doing good. He's on pace to come back this season. That could mean he's doing good. He's practicing with us again. As far as I know, he wasn't practicing during that day of practice. I don't know how much exposure the Minnesota media has really gotten to practice since then. It doesn't seem like much, just from looking at some of the other people that cover the team. They haven't really had much of an update since that press conference. So it's a complete unknown. We honestly have absolutely no idea going in as to whether or not he's going to be active. Also, Daniel Jackson, their star wide receiver, was also dealing with some sort of injury. And so I know a lot of people are reading into it. And you've got the phrase Vegas knows before we know. So a lot of people believe the reason that the line has swung from 2.5 point underdogs for Carolina to 2.5 point favorites is because they know that Taylor's not going to play, or that Jackson's not going to play, or possibly even both. I don't really know if you can read that much into it, because to me, I don't know how these people would know this stuff. There are certain insiders, links to these programs where they can tell you that. So maybe you want to read in, but from my perspective, and what I'm assuming the staff is telling them, is until we show up on game day, we step out onto the field, and Taylor is not in uniform, Jackson's not in uniform, whatever, we are preparing as if those guys are going to play. And if both of those guys play, you've got a big-time receiver that Elijah Huzzie more than likely is going to spend the majority of the night matched up on. I feel comfortable with that matchup, especially since last year Carolina was able to handle that with Marcus Allen pretty much being the guy that's on him. And look, maybe you put Marcus Allen on him most of the night, since that was the guy that handled him and did a pretty good job of that last year. Also, remember that the safety play is being bragged about. So you're going to have more help over the top against a dynamic receiver like Jackson. When it comes to Taylor, that's the one you're probably more concerned about, because their running game, I think, is what they are going to lean on, especially – I said Quincaro was a transfer. He was a transfer last year. He was on that team. He's actually a returning starter for them, but he graded out pretty well. Irsay is really, really good. I mean, a guy that's getting national recognition for how well he played on the offensive line last year. They returned 4 guys down there from a very physical unit, and a team that I think, ran the ball solidly, but wants to take it another step forward this year. Their game plan, as you mentioned, even with bringing in Brosmer, which I think of him a little bit more highly. I think, especially quarterback, you can either play the position or you can't. It really doesn't matter what level you're at. Yes, it might be a step up, but I think he can probably handle it. The bigger thing is I don't think they're going to stray away from what they've always been. Minnesota's a team that plays in the Big Ten, and they play Big Ten football. They want to lean on their running game. They want to have a strong defense, especially in their front seven, and that they will win games ugly. That's what they want to do. Their thing was, can we find a quarterback that can throw a pass more than 5 yards without pooping himself? Because that was pretty much what they had last year, and we saw that in Chapel Hill. So I think this offense probably provides a little more of a challenge than the one that we saw last year. But I don't think this is going to be a barn-burning offense. To me, unless this Tar Heel defense is just downright horrible, there is no way this team's putting up 30 points on this team. I think it'll be an uglier game. Carolina's just got to be ready for the physicality. You go over to the defensive side of the ball for Minnesota, and it's a weird group. Last year, allowed 26.7 points per game. Not at all what you want. That's definitely one of the lower numbers in the entire country, and especially in the Big Ten. 368.4 yards of total offense allowed, 219.3 passing yards per game allowed. Not necessarily the worst. Their bigger concern is their run defense, where they allowed 149.1 rushing yards per game. And look, we've seen some numbers that have been much higher than that at times on the Tar Heel side, but this was the worst run defense in the Big Ten a year ago. They do that is going to be a huge focus of this group. It's a reason why they brought in a new defensive coordinator in Corey Hetherman. And so he's going to employ a new scheme. I think that's part of the reason why they didn't release the depth chart. I think also, the injuries on the offensive side are probably another big part of that. But this is a group that has some talent. I think it really starts on the defensive line, where you've got 3 of the 4 starters from a year ago that return. The one guy that wasn't, by the way, is Ja Joyner, who only had 18 total tackles. 7.5 of those were tackles for loss, and 7.5 were sacks. So every tackle for loss this dude had was a sack. He is the definition of a pass rusher, and he wasn't even a starter for them last year. He'll team with Danny Strigo, who had 51 total tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks. They also return both guys in the middle of their defense. So this is going to be a stout front that Carolina is going to be going against. At the linebacker spot, an area that they want to see improvement, no doubt. Cody Lindenberg being back. He only played in 4 games last year, had 31 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss. That will certainly help. And then you've got 2 guys that were contributors there last year, and we'll see how that rotation works, because both guys played a significant amount and did some decent things. Maverick Baranowski had 52 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss. Devin Williams, also another option who will be rotating with him, could play a little bit if they do have certain moments where they go to a 4-3 look. He had 52 total tackles and 2 tackles for loss. Biggest question mark with this Minnesota team is their secondary, because they lost Tyler Nubin, who was a high draft pick in the NFL draft, to the New York Giants, and they also lost Trayvon Jones out at cornerback. So now they have to make some adjustments back there. 2 new starters. We'll see how they adjust to that. But they also bring back Justin Wally, who played a lot back there last year, alongside the guy that I think anchors this secondary. Team high 59 total tackles a year ago and 5 tackles for loss, along with 2 interceptions for Jack Henderson. That'll be the guy to keep an eye on. So when you look at this defense for Minnesota, I think the thing to watch is going to be this group up front, because this is going to test a new Carolina offensive line right out of the gate.
Yeah, you're breaking in, 4 new offensive linemen, a group that has not played together on the road, hostile environment, against what Mack Brown has called probably the second best defensive front they'll see all season long. And so, I'll take the football man for his word. And, these games, we make fun of Herbstreit for saying that every time he talks about a game on game day, but these games are won and lost up front. And I think there are some people that loosely follow the program that look at 4 new offensive linemen and they're concerned, how does that look on the road at Minnesota? For those of us that have watched this program and seen the struggles of that group, it could be refreshing to have what you're breaking in up front. I think Carolina's bigger. I think they're more athletic up there. So it definitely, can Carolina win in the trenches? Can they do what they want to do against their front 7? Because if they do, that means you're running the ball the way you want to run the ball, and Carolina's got to run the ball to win the game. But B, it'll open up opportunities in the passing game for you to exploit their secondary, to where maybe you hit the 2 to 3 big plays in the passing game. You probably got to hit if you want to win this ball game. So this is a really good test for where this Carolina offense is, because the front 7's good, but if you do what you need to do, there will be opportunities there for you to make those big plays that we're used to seeing this Carolina offense make. So it all starts and ends up front. Willie Lampkin and the crew. Can they move Minnesota's defensive line around? If they can, it's a good sign for Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And I will say, I like catching this defensive line at this point of the season as opposed to later in the year. When this group gets worn down, I mean, we saw it last year. That was a big part, was that Carolina caught the best defensive line groups that they faced at the end of the year. And so now you're hoping, okay, well, we're catching them early. And I mean, we saw this defensive line group last year, and Carolina, for the most part, did a good job of handling them. So I don't know. I don't know how much you can really read into that, because it doesn't really matter. Most of those guys are not back. The only one that is Willie Lampkin. So, I mean, look, you can take certain things away from what you did last year against this group, but this is a whole new offensive line group. And I think the thing that you're hoping is that better depth will allow you to sort of have a shorter leash. If a certain guy struggles, you're going to pull him out and you're going to put somebody else in there. So we'll have to wait and see. In terms of special teams for Minnesota, both their place kicker and their punter do return. Punter Mark Crawford, solid last year, 42 and a half yard average on 65 punts. They do have a really, really good kicker in Dragan Quiche. He nailed 23 of 27 field goals a year ago. One of the highest made field goal marks in the entire country. And then in terms of their returner, it'll be Quentin Redding, who will be handling the majority of the return duties this year for the team. Last year, he held that role, was solid, not great as a kick returner. Averages 15.7 yards per return, so that could be helpful for Carolina with the issues that they had in terms of slowing down opposing kick returns. Last year, finished with the third worst kick return coverage unit in the entire country. Punt returns, that's the area to watch them. Much more dangerous there. 6 returns last year, a 13.5 yard average, which is very, very good. So now we move to the Tar Heel side of things. What are we talking about going in with the Tar Heels? Well, the first thing that you lead off with, and how could you not, is how will the staff handle the quarterbacks? I think there's a lot of people going back and forth. There's certain people that believe that what Mack Brown said the other day is Mack Brown playing the game, and that he doesn't actually plan on using 2 quarterbacks unless one of the guys really struggles. There's other people that believe that he's going to go in and it's going to be like 2014, where in the opener, Carolina was going back and forth. They would maybe give 2 consecutive drives to either Marquise Williams or Mitch Trubisky, but they would eventually go to the other quarterback. There's other people, that think that it's, it could be even more hectic than that, where it's pretty much drive after drive. You're just switching them off until you just figure out maybe at halftime who you actually want. What do you think they're actually going to do at the quarterback spot? And how do you think that the staff is going to go about juggling this?
Mack Brown watched the SMU game against Nevada last week. They played 2 quarterbacks. They nearly lost on the road as significant favorites.
Which for them was even stupider, because they have a guy in Preston Stone who is a great quarterback. Made no sense. But you're right. You're right.
My hope is that whoever takes the first snap throws a 75-yard touchdown and we don't got to worry about this. I think you're going to see both of them play, at least in the first half, and hopefully by halftime we have a good feeling of who needs to be in there. I think in this game that guy is going to be Max Johnson. We rave about his experience. We rave about his ability to protect the football. All right, well, this lends to him being the guy that plays this game, because you're on the road, power conference opponent. You can't afford to turn the football over. So I think Max Johnson's going to be the guy that we see first. And I think depending on what he does, I don't think it'll be a short leash. Like I don't think if they don't score a touchdown in their first 2 drives, they're taking him out. But if we're sitting there at halftime and it's 7-3, 10-7, you're probably going to see the other guy in the second half. So I expect both of them to play because every time Mack Brown has talked since Friday, he said he wants to play both quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what to expect. I think that part of what he said the other day was him just playing the game because he doesn't want to give anything away. He's basically saying, look, if you're not going to give us anything, then we're not going to give you anything. But I do think that it's certainly possible that the staff really likes both of these guys. I think there's no way around it. Connor Harrell, if you're trying to run the football at a high level, Connor Harrell's your guy because he's a guy that is going to be able to give you something on the ground that Max Johnson isn't. Yes, Max Johnson is a guy that can catch people off guard with his legs, but that's when he has to tuck and run because there's nothing open downfield. You are not designing runs for him. Connor Harrell, no, you're going to be designing run plays for him. We saw a sneak preview of it in the bowl game. So if they go with him, I think that's probably what you're looking at, where Max Johnson could be the guy when they want to throw the football that they go to. I hope that's not the mindset. To me, if it's we start Max Johnson, I think it should be start him if that's the guy you feel the best about, or if it's Harrell, let that guy go through the first half. And if things really look that bad at halftime, or, I mean, God forbid the game gets that out of hand where it's 17-0, you've gone 3 and out for like 4 straight drives. Okay, then put the other quarterback in and let's see what we got. But I just don't want it to be a panic move, and I don't want this to be legitimate juggling of 2 quarterbacks where it's literally, drive by drive, we're trying to figure out who the hell we're putting in. So, and I would think just hearing again how Mack Brown has talked about 2 quarterbacks, I don't think that's the mindset that he wants either, but I honestly have no idea going in, and that's the element of this game that certainly does scare me a little bit. The one thing that doesn't scare me is what Omarion Hampton brings to the table. Now, the biggest question is if Minnesota decides to load the box in this game, which is certainly possible, considering that you saw teams late last year do it, and that was with a quarterback that could actually beat you at certain times if he had time in the pocket. This is a group of quarterbacks that we just don't know if they're able to beat people in this offense. So they're going to be daring Carolina to stand back there and throw the football. They're going to try to load the box, slow down Omarion Hampton. So, I mean, the thing is will the team actually be able to lean on their senior running back if Minnesota is going to be as aggressive as we think they are?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think he's the best running back in the country. And if I think that, he should be able to still produce against 7, 8-man fronts. Now, he needs his offensive line to create holes for him. It can't be something where, because I think he led the country last year in yards after contact. Mm-hmm. This can't be a situation where we're handling him the football and he's getting hit. Because, okay, then, no, we're not doing anything. But, yeah, no, I mean, I think, is this going to be a game where Omarion runs for 175 yards? No, probably not. This probably is the game where he takes it 25, 28 times, maybe cracks 110, but what you're hoping is that he's just wearing them down as the game moves along. So, yep, I'll say yeah, because I think Omarion Hampton is the best running back in the country, and if that's the case, he'll show up and produce no matter how many guys he has to run through.
Yeah, I think as long as it's not as bad as what we saw against State at the end of last year, where the minute he's taking the handoff, somebody is already beaten and they're basically taking the handoff with him, nearly causing a fumble. I think outside of that, he will be able to run the ball. And especially because you look back at what that run defense was a year ago for Minnesota. I get it. You bring in a new defensive coordinator. I don't think it's going to look 100% different right out of the gate. And we saw, the first week of college football, and again, it's week 0, but I think it showed us that, teams the thing they're going to lean on early is the run game, because for the most part, it's going to work. When your offensive line is in its best shape right out of the gate to start the season, typically putting your guys downhill, letting them do what is usually the strength of every offensive lineman, run block, it's going to lead to success. And I feel like you look at this group, and I think that's how they're built. I mean, we've got humongous tackles on the outside, and I think that length could certainly help them in pass protection. But they're guys that I think their strength is in the run game. We know Willie Lampkin, he can really do either, but that's certainly his strength. Austin Blasky on the inside, that's his strength. So I think running behind this offensive line, I don't know if it's going to be perfect, but I think there'll be enough there where Omarion Hampton will be able to have at least some sort of success. The other thing that has to happen to help these quarterbacks out is the pass catchers have to separate themselves, because when we entered the fall, early on, they were saying we don't really have a clear number one pass catcher. Well, somebody has to step up, or multiple guys have to step up and show that they can be those guys that can be relied on. I think early in the game, you could see the tight ends be leaned on a lot. Omarion Hampton out of the backfield could be leaned on a lot, sort of similar to what you saw from Florida State and Georgia Tech to a certain extent in the first half of their game, especially if Max Johnson is in there. Getting some of those easy completions to get your quarterback in a rhythm, that's where you need guys like Bryson Nesbitt, John Copenhaver even more so, and Omarion Hampton. But then as the game goes along, that's where you need guys like J.J. Jones to start separating downfield and becoming a guy that can be relied on. Nate McCullum, who last year was so great in the matchup in Chapel Hill, and they've been raving about what he's been doing all throughout this offseason. He needs to be someone that Max Johnson can go to, even for him, probably early in the game on some of those short passes as well. Kobe Paysour, another guy, hopefully if he's healthy, can step up. I think that's another thing that you really want to see in this game. Regardless of who the quarterback is, this group of pass catchers needs to be able to help their guy out.
Yeah, it would be wise of Chip Lindsey to utilize the tight end early and often, settle down whichever quarterback is out there. And look, I think Nesbitt in particular is a matchup nightmare to begin with. So, but you're going to need your J.J. Joneses, you're going to need your Kobe Paysours, you're going to need your Nate McCullums, and you're going to maybe need a Gavin Blackwell, a Chris Culliver, one of those guys to step up or make a play or two in the passing game to really open up the door for you to win the game. Look, we know there's talent in the wide receiver room. This is a good growing up moment for that group and a good confidence booster for that group. They come out here and they make a lot of plays and Carolina wins. You will never know what it does for their confidence. And so, as much as this is going to be a game that's one up front, and I think whichever team runs the ball will probably win the game, you're still going to have to make plays in the passing game. And, Carolina's going to have to find someone outside of J.J. Jones that they can rely on. Minnesota will look to take away Nate McCullum after what he did against them last year. We know what Kobe Paysour is capable of doing when he's on the football field. If those guys all produce and Carolina can throw the football, I think you trust that offense more than you trust Minnesota's offense to put more points up on the board.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen the talent of a lot of these guys in this room. I feel like there's enough there to be confident that this will happen, but it's crucial. And these guys have to know that going in, because your quarterback is not Sam Howell or Drake May. So, yeah, it's going to be from the word go. These guys have to be locked in, and they have to make those plays when the ball comes their way, which is something that, at times we've seen certain guys struggle with. Like for me, I think the biggest one is McCullum, because he just disappeared at the end of last year when Kobe Paysour went down with the injury. How will he respond? Because, this should be a game you should be extremely confident in. You destroyed this team a year ago, and that was when their secondary may have even been better than it was heading into this game. So we'll see what that group does. Now, defensively, I mean, look, I think the thing that this group is looking at, they should be looking back to last year. And you did that with a guy that, as a defensive coordinator, we heard the scheme at times was complex. It was a group that literally that day. Now, I think they knew that he was going to be out for a significant period of time, but before the game, it's announced that the guy that they were expecting to start as their nickel corner was out for the entire year. Elijah Huzzie was just moved into the star position probably like a week before that, having to cover for Boykins, who got injured. And so there were a lot of different things going on. And in that opener, you came out and absolutely dominated South Carolina. And again, a lot of it has to do with it's the first game of the year. That's the healthiest you're going to be. That's the most rested that you're probably going to be the entire season. I think this defense, they have to feed off of that performance from last year and look at that and say, look, we're even more talented this year. We feel like we're in a scheme that fits us a little bit better. And I mean, pretty much the entire group is back with certain areas that are bulked up even more by depth. They have to feel confident going in that they can repeat, maybe not that exact performance, but something relatively similar to that.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the first step to changing the narrative and taking that next step as a unit defensively. I think they're better coached. I think the physicality that Mack Brown used in this training camp is going to benefit this group because they've tackled as much as they've had since he came back. I think that's going to show up, and I think you're going to have, just the ability to make plays. And this isn't an offense that I think is going to beat you with big plays. Like if we give up, 35 plus points and 400 plus yards, not going to be a fun recap. I mean, I know it'll be one game. There's going to be some high level complaining.
I'm going to be honest. If they let that up, it's full panic. The season is over. I mean, this offense is not good. I'm sorry. This offense is not good enough to put that many points up against this group.
So the biggest thing for this game is doing what you did last year, which was building confidence and playing away in a manner that could allow you to win big-time football games. You did that in the opener last year with the way you dominated the trenches against South Carolina. You held Minnesota to 13 points when they came to your building last year. So you have success against this group as it is, but I think it's fair to expect Carolina to play adequately defensively tomorrow, and that's the expectation.
Yeah, certainly. I think that, anything less from this group. I mean, if they struggle the way that they did, towards the end of last year, especially if it's somewhere in that range that you were talking about, there'll be reason to go into a state of panic. I mean, you look back at last year's game between these two sides, and I mean, Carolina, defensively, they had an extremely successful day as well. Like, this wasn't a team that ran for a ton of yards on them. That was probably the one area that they needed to clean up. But they got pressure on the quarterback. They forced 2 turnovers, 2 interceptions. So you're hoping that this year's group, which we think is much more complete, will be able to do those certain things. You move on. I mean, I think one of the other things defensively is this will be a good test of, is the depth actually there? Maybe that's not even the right question. Will the staff actually use the depth? We've heard, and they said it before last year, and we believed them. The bench is a great motivator. They didn't use it. This year, do we actually believe that there is depth there? I do. I think particularly in the secondary, it's there. I think defensive line, it's there more so than last year, where if guys aren't performing, then you can rotate them out and try other guys in there. The only position you can't do that at is linebacker, although with Amari Campbell, he's going to play. I'd be stunned if he doesn't, but he may be limited to begin with, meaning that they may have to rotate guys in. This is a game where if guys are struggling, this staff cannot be hesitant to pull them out if they have the depth that they're telling us they do.
Yeah, and I think it's something to monitor in the first half. If this game's close in the second half, you're going to play your starters more than, virtually every play. So, I think that's why if you can get off to a good start and play with a lead, it allows you to do some of that rotation stuff, keep these guys fresh. If you need to play your starters extensively in the second half, I think. I think they'll do it because I mean Jeff Collins told him when he interviewed, you played your players too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a guy that was coaching against him, he was like, I knew that you were worn down. So I think you've got a coordinator that's actually mindful of that, and I think that'll kind of translate onto the playing field. So um, I think as far unless they don't do it, I think it's reasonable to expect there to be rotation up front and depth in the secondary because they've talked about it all preseason long. So that should be on the field Thursday night, no question.
All right. Then the last thing, storyline wise, I think is special teams and really just where this group is at because we heard the struggles from Noah Burnett in the spring. Haven't heard anything about him since then. So I would assume that means that things are at least in better standing. And then, the rest of the group, I mean, yeah, punt returner. I think both returner spots look solid. It's really every other area that you're really concerned about. Can the team punt the ball? That's going to be crucial in this game, especially if we think it's going to be a low-scoring game. Can the team cover kicks? Last year, as I mentioned, one of the worst in the entire country. They need to do it with punt returns as well. And when it comes to the punt return unit or punt coverage unit, this is a group that needs to just block better. You had 3 punts blocked last year. Something like that happening in this game would be a complete disaster. So this special teams group, especially in a game where we think it's going to be close like this one, you need to execute flawlessly or else you are not going to win this game.
Yeah, field position is going to be a big part in this game. Whichever team has shorter fields to navigate more often than not, I think wins. So your coverage has to be good. You got to make sure you're not out kicking your coverage.
Mm-hmm.
You got to tackle. You can't have costly penalties, whether it's a block in the back or whatever it is. And I talk about this all the time. Your special teams in the game of football, your Ohio State, your Georgias, your Bamas, your Texases, your Michigans, they're good on special teams. Dare I say they're special at special teams. If Carolina wants to take that next step and win games they should they should win that they've lost over the years, special teams have played a role in that. And so this is a great first way to kind of put all the struggles behind you, because if Carolina wins, they may not win because of a field goal, but it might be because they did a much better job in the punting game and the kickoff game. And so you need to be up to par in that game because you don't want to be giving your opponent shorter fields to work with than what you got to deal with.
All right, let's get to our keys to the game. My first key that I wrote down is figure out who your quarterback is early. And like I said, if there's a circumstance where things are just that bad and you think that putting in the backup is going to generate some sort of momentum, something like that, then do it. But if you're going to switch your quarterback, that's who you got to stick with the entire night. To me, you can't bounce back and forth because if you do, then I feel like that is a recipe for disaster. So this staff, they have to make up their mind, whether even if it means going into warm-ups, they don't know who it is, but someone steps up, roll with that guy, and let's see what we got.
Well, it's not the staff has to make up their mind. It's one of the players has to make their mind up for them. And so I think if it happens in this game, I think it's going to be Max. I think this is – I mean, you didn't go out and get him just for this game, but, like, it kind of feels like, this was a big reason why you went and got him was you won't – it's that 1,600 SEC snaps with 900 passes thrown in the SEC. You want that on display on Thursday night. So, that's the hope. And I don't think Chip Lindsey is going to be stubborn. Like, I think if Max Johnson engineers 2 scoring drives right out of the gate, I don't think you're seeing Connor Harrell. So as much as the staff has to make up their mind, no, a player has to make their mind up for them. I just think if that's going to be the case, it's going to be Max Johnson.
Well, I will say, I mean, the thing is like, I mean, at this point, they've showed you everything they got. Like, at some point, the staff also has to make up their mind. Like, these are who these guys are. You can't, I mean, I know he said the other day that we'll just, use 2 quarterbacks the whole year. Yeah, if you don't want to have a job at the end of the year, you'll use 2 quarterbacks the entire year. That is not a game plan for success. At that rate, just go to Jacoby Criswell. I mean, that would make no sense. So, yeah, I think they've showed you everything that they can put out there. Now it's let's make a decision, roll with a guy, and if it's that bad, make the decision to go to the other guy, but stick with that and just ride it out. Live with the results. That's how I think they need to approach this game if they want to have a chance to win this game. The other big thing for me, and if you didn't have the quarterback issue, if you figured out who your starting quarterback is, this would be the number one thing, no questions asked, and that's win the line of scrimmage, because this is a group that is as experienced as just about any group that you're going to face this year in terms of returning starters. I mentioned they've got 2 dynamic edge rushers on the defensive side of the ball that this offensive line has to prepare for, and offensively, this is a physical unit. You saw it last year against you. You need to bring that physicality out of the gate. This defensive line for Carolina is supposedly deep. Well, we need to see that tested in this game. This is why you brought in a guy like Joshua Harris. He's a guy that in this game against a team that can run the football, you want to see him along with hopefully a Travis Shaw that's ready to step up and play. You want to see those guys slowing down the run in the middle for you. But if Carolina wants to win this game, it starts in the trenches.
Yep. I don't see a situation where Carolina gets thoroughly outplayed up front and wins. And so, we've talked about breaking in the new offensive lineman. I think that's going to be good for Carolina. I believe in their ability more than what we've seen in years past. And then defensively, you've actually built some depth up there. You've got, I think, an upgrade at the position coach as well. So it needs to reflect on the playing field. And so, if Carolina's offensive line isn't getting any push up front, and on the other side, Carolina's defensive line is getting moved around, it's probably a sign that it's not going to go the way we want this game to go. If it's the other way around, where Carolina's moving Minnesota's defensive line around and our defensive line is living in their backfield, I think that really, tilts the favor in Carolina's hands, because, you don't go on the road into Big Ten country and win unless you outplay them up front. So we're going to learn a lot about this offensive line and this defensive line in about 40 hours or so.
Yeah, and I mean, the offensive line, like, look, if there's moments where that group struggles, yeah, it's their first game ever playing together. The defensive line, there is absolutely no excuse. These guys have been together for years. You insert a guy in Joshua Harris that I don't know what we're supposed to make of the fact that he is pretty much just outplaying the other guys. There's no excuse for this group. This is the type of game where, with Ted Monachino as your new coach, which we think is what was standing in the way for you guys, it's time to step up and make a statement. The other thing, third key to the game, and this one also incredibly important, Carolina has to capitalize on short fields and red zone opportunities, because in years past, it seemed like for the most part, you were able to do this and you would have many different shots at this. The short fields, I think you didn't have nearly as many of those, but you had an explosive offense that could throw the ball down the field, and you had a quarterback that you knew could move you up and down the field on crucial drives. We don't know if we've got that right now. So whenever you get short fields and whenever you get into the red zone, when you get in the red zone in this game, it's got to be 6, because those opportunities could be extremely limited. Carolina needs to execute in both of those areas in order to win.
Yeah, 6 is greater than 3. And so
Thank
you
you.
need to put sixes up on the board more often than not. I don't think you got to score 30 plus to win the game, but you got to get
No.
to at least 24, I think. If you get to 24, I think you have a really good shot at winning this thing. It just comes down to being efficient. And the best way to do it is to stay ahead of the chains, which means you're not giving up sacks. You're getting positive runs in the run game, not committing stupid penalties. If you do those things, I think you've got enough weapons, and I think Chip Lindsey's proven to be a good enough coordinator to call an offense that scores enough points to win. So, I think it's why we talked about field position. Can you get shorter field so you're not having to ask whichever quarterback it is to drive the ball 75, 80 yards, drive after drive after drive? If Carolina can do that, if they can win the field position battle and make Minnesota pay, that's just another thing that really lends to them winning the game.
All right, it's time for our predictions. Like you said, last night we kind of gave it away a little bit about the result of the game in terms of win-loss. But what do you see happening for the Tar Heels in this matchup? Maybe a score prediction from you, possibly.
Yeah, I'm not changing from what I did last night. I still think Carolina wins. I think it's going to be a fun game, highly competitive game, which means middle of the third quarter, starting that fourth quarter, we're all going to be sitting there on the edge of our seats. I think Carolina's just better. I think they got more talent. I think they're deeper. I think they're healthier. I think they're better coached. I still like our quarterback situation over their quarterback situation. So I think Carolina goes on the road and picks up a 24-14 win at Minnesota.
Ooh, jeez, I could sign up for that in a minute, allowing 14 points. I'm not skewing away from my pick last night either. I think Carolina wins this game. Again, I was more on the fence. I think if Taylor was fully healthy, that could be a big issue. I think there's a chance that he plays, but he could still be limited with that hamstring injury. So we'll just have to wait and see. I think the biggest thing that will be the difference in this game is I think Carolina will be able to run the ball successfully. And if they can do that in just about any game this season, they are going to have a great chance to win because you've got one of the best running backs in the country. I think they lean on Amari and Hampton early. I think they'll even have some success with the other guys. Darwin Barlow and Caleb Hood, I think, will rotate in at times too. I think the fact that you saw last year J.J. Jones perform the way that he did in the bowl game, I think he's ready to step up and be that number one receiver for Carolina. I also love the fact that the tight ends, you got both of them. Hopefully, John Copenhaver can be healthy in this game. Hopefully, he doesn't get hurt on the first drive like he did last year. If you've got both of those guys at your disposal, I think regardless of which quarterback is in there, Carolina will be able to move it. And I do think that Carolina will find their quarterback in this game, whether it's they stick with him like I want them to do out of the gate, ride one of the quarterbacks, and that's the guy that carries you throughout this game. That's a recipe for success. Or if they end up, along the way having to find the guy, I think they will eventually settle on a quarterback at least before halftime, and that will allow them to move the ball offensively. And defensively, I think they'll do enough taking the fight to this group because I think this is the best they can look, considering that they're the healthiest they're going to be all season, and they're probably the most rested. I know camp was difficult, but this is the most rested that you are in any point of the season. We saw the way this team came out of the gate last year with their hair on fire. I think you'll see similar stuff from Carolina in this game this year. I think I'm concerned about it coming down to special teams. It's going to be an extremely close game, but give me Carolina in this one. I like them 24-20 over Minnesota to pick up their first win of the season. Well, regardless of what happens, guys, we're going to be here recapping the game for you guys. On the website side of things, we'll have the takeaways. Those will be out early on Friday morning for you guys to check out. And then we'll be back on the podcast on Friday night, recapping the game, telling you all of our opinions on what we saw. Meanwhile, for more in-depth information on the game, heading in, we will have the preview on the website tomorrow for you guys to check out. I'm going to be doing everything that I possibly can to see if they give any more news on the statuses of Darius Taylor, as well as Daniel Jackson. If they do, we'll have that in the article for you guys to check out. So again, make sure you're keeping an eye on the website for all that stuff. Meanwhile, on the basketball side of things, I know we had a couple of people that came in that asked the question about what's going on with Zayden High. Well, we have an article on the website that you guys can check out. Any offseason news that will follow or any more information on that story, we'll, of course, have you covered over there on HeelToughBlog.com. But also, you can check out the Four Corners podcast, same place that you just watched this episode of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Or if you're someone that likes to listen, you can go to the website or wherever you get your podcast and check it out. So all of the information that you need, all in one place, HeelToughBlog.com. And that's why we encourage you guys every morning that you wake up for the latest news and opinions on Tar Heel football and basketball, head over to HeelToughBlog.com. But for now, that is going to wrap it up for this edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. I want to thank Josh for hosting with me. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.